Predictions has been one of the key thought leadership initiatives that we take on each year, and so very grateful to have Mark participate in our community and again here joining us today. We also have a special treat for you today, which will be that Mark's going to talk with longtime TAG member Paul Gray about his newest book, The Pattern Future, which takes on a path towards learning about how we might see a little bit like Mark sees. We're also delighted to have Varvid here again to assist us with streaming, and there is a Facebook live stream happening now and readily available. I'm looking up at our wonderful Athena up in the booth to double check in on that.
Thanks, Meg. I'm Ed O'Neill. I'm acting president of the TAG board, and it's my great honor to also welcome you here. Emergency Reporting and VSH are proud sponsors of TAG and are pleased to invest in the community as presenting sponsors of Predictions. We're delighted to be joined by others in sponsoring of this event, including Emergency Reporting, VSH, Whatcom Community College for providing this wonderful facility, and Crave Catering for providing the wonderful food. We also want to say thank you to our table sponsors, Alpha Technologies, Bellingham Angel Investors, Cascade Job Corps, Skagit Bank, and RE/MAX. You know, without great support from our event sponsors like this, there's no way we could pull this off. So thank you all for coming in, and hope to see you all back here next year. I also want to say a quick thank you to our association sponsors. These are the companies that contribute their time, energy, and financial support on an ongoing basis to TAG that make the organization sustaining within the community. This year, it's my pleasure to say thank you to the galactic sponsor of TAG, Emergency Reporting, our global sponsors, Alpha Technologies, Bellingham National Bank, Clear Story Investments, the Mouliot Group, Saturna Capital, and Western Washington. We also have gold sponsors, Bellingham Angel Investors, CyberWatch West, People's Bank, Varvid, Veritas, VSH, Heritage Bank, and Pogo Zone. So thank you to all of you.
We're delighted to host the event here at Whatcom Community College. As many of you know, Whatcom has been doing some remarkably amazing work within our community. Thanks for this wonderful space and the community that's being created. With the associate degree programs, certificate programs, and newly founded baccalaureate programs, Whatcom is truly leading the way in terms of how we can access our talent pipeline. I'd like to welcome Ed Harry to join us in welcoming you to Whatcom and this wonderful college.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ed Harry, Vice President for Instruction here at the college, and I'm pleased to welcome you to Whatcom. Thank you for joining us for another intriguing and enlightening Predictions Luncheon by Mark Anderson and sponsored by TAG. Welcome back, Mark. I'd like to welcome and thank the college trustees who are so supportive of our college and students and who take the time to attend these events for our college and the community. So trustees Tim Douglas and John Pedlow, can you just raise your hands to be recognized? Thank you. As well as our president, Kathy Hiani Brown, who's also at our table right there. I'd also like to thank all of you who have supported our college programs throughout the year. There are several individuals who have provided really impactful support, providing our students with real-world experiences through internships or employment, and I'd like to ask them to just be recognized with a wave of their hand. Dave Dams and Ed O'Neill, Senior Leadership at Emergency Reporting. John Miller at Vitech, a local supply chain software company, and John also serves on our Computer Information Systems Advisory Committee. Jim Hopt, General Manager of the Bellwether Hotel, who also serves on our Hospitality and Tourism Advisory Committee. And Meg Weber, past Executive Director of TAG and former member of the college's Worker Retraining Advisory Committee. Thank you all for your support. The college has hosted this event for many years, over a decade, as Meg mentioned, and hopefully for many more to come, through a strong partnership with TAG. We really value our collaboration with community organizations like TAG to provide our students with internship opportunities, employment, input into our curriculum, and professional development for our faculty and staff. TAG has also supported our scholarship fund with an annual donation of $1,000 to the Whatcom Community College Foundation. This contribution and many others ensure deserving students are able to pursue their education. The demand for high-quality education to support industry needs is strong. As an example, the number of students enrolled in our computer information systems and cybersecurity programs has increased by over 50% in only a few years, from 193 students 3 years ago to almost 300 right now. It's critical for our programs to stay relevant and in sync with trends in the workplace, and we did just that when we began offering our first Bachelor of Applied Science degree in IT networking this year. Colleges like Whatcom need to position themselves as helping business and industry with the trained workforce, and we can only be successful in this because of the valuable partnerships we have with business and industry, such as those we have with many of you. Each quarter, we're graduating qualified individuals who will be able to effectively support and secure your business infrastructure and put today's positive predictions into action. So thank you again for joining us.
Well, it's my pleasure again to introduce our keynote speaker. You know, nothing reveals more about us than our calendar and our checkbook. Where we invest our time and our money really reveals what's important to us. In the case of our guest speaker, he's always quick to pencil in the predictions event when I know his calendar is populated with many other appointments. It really reveals how he cares about sharing his research and his predictions with us here in Bellingham. As to his checkbook, I've seen this man contribute to saving our orcas, saving our ozone, saving our endangered species around the world. He's doing this, these planet-saving works through investments in his initiatives, such as the Orca Relief Citizens Alliance, Firebooks, Fire Films, the New Earth Energy Monitoring Service, and of course his groundbreaking annual conference series, Future in Reviews. And by the way, on your tables are information cards about this coming year's fire conference, and there's discounts for you for attending today, as well as discounts for Mark's insightful Strategic News Service publication. Consider treating yourself this year to these mind-expanding experiences. Peter Diamandis is the founder and chairman of the X Prize Foundation. I recently read his daily affirmation and immediately thought of our guest speaker. I am joy. I am love. I am gratitude. I feel, hear, see, how that purpose in my life is to inspire and to guide the transformation of humanity on and off the earth. That's Mark. Very quickly, let me give you a quick recap of what Mark's been up to since he was with us last year. It's pretty amazing, as usual. He's CEO of the Coventry Computer. That's the first computer designed ground up for pattern computing. And the company has had 3 rounds of funding so far, all oversubscribed. Well done. The past year also saw the publication of his book, The Pattern Future, which describes his discoveries and applications of pattern computing and predicting major events in global economies. I'll be interviewing Mark about this book immediately after this introduction. And at the end of the program, the books will be for sale, and Mark is happy to get his signing pen out for you. Mark also published at the end of this year the first book, Flow and Interaction, aptly called The Universal Powers of Flow and Interaction. And Curtis Wong, who's the principal researcher at Microsoft Research, had this to say about the publication. You have achieved what Leonardo aspired to. Pretty heady. And just so you don't be left with the impression that Mark works all the time and doesn't play, he did squeeze in 5 of his road trips this year. and one was a self-driving tour of the 1,300-mile ring road around Iceland with his family. And yes, Mark has a need for speed. He told me he just received a speeding ticket in the mail from the friendly Iceland Police Department. Please help me welcome Mark Anderson. This is the book. I think it's up there. So I love books, so this is a particularly good treat to be doing this, Mark. So got a series of questions that I hope kind of reflect what might be on the mind of our audience. And I'll start with an easy one. So what inspired you to write this book, The Patterned Future?
Well, I've spent 22 years doing this work, and as time went by, I realized how unusual it was. At first, I thought I was just doing what everybody else does, and I think that in a way, we all do the same thing. We all look for patterns around us every day. But I had made a decision 22 years ago. I'd been a scientist since I was 5 years old, and I had made a decision back when I was in my early 20s that I had to re-examine the whole question of pattern recognition because it was so important. It wasn't just something you should kind of pick up on the side. It ought to be the driving part of how you see the world. And so I tried to retrain myself to do things that way, and the result was, as those who read S&S know, making all kinds of crazy discoveries that I had no right, and the best way to say it is I had no right whatsoever to know the things that I was able to stumble upon without any area training or, so it's a very interesting thing that if you focus on this process, you get a ticket to make discoveries that you have no right to make in terms of what we would normally think of.
Okay.
So I thought I'd write a book about it.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad you did. Is your definition of pattern recognition any different than others?
I think it's not the definition. I would say no.
Okay.
But I believe that the application is very different. So everyone probably has the same definition. You look for patterns and things. But how much time did you spend doing that? And how deeply did you understand how to do that? And how much effort did you put into thinking about the human brain and its development from baby to now, to adult? And how hard do you work on doing the things you have to do to be good at that? And in that sense, very different. Right? Very, very, very different, I think. Okay. And I tend to use, and I think you're going to come to this, but I tend to use the word pattern discovery now. I used to just call it pattern recognition, but even in the name of the book, we changed the name to include the term pattern discovery, because pattern discovery is qualitatively different from just saying the next thing, the next thing, the next thing.
Okay. All right. In the book, you talk about building a pattern recognition brain. So how do you do that? Because I think we all would like that kind of brain.
Right. Well, I think we all want to think that we're the only rational person in the room, right? And we're right and they're wrong, whoever they are. And we're the victims and they're the transgressors. Human nature is a very interesting thing, right? And if you wanted to be a scientist, so there's a step. You're making a commitment to objective thinking because that's the only way you get forward, pretty much. And if you look at the scientific method, you see, well, I find this fascinating. So you're in, your 8th grade, they teach you the scientific method. You make up an idea, you test it, you get the results, and then you go rewind, wash, go again, right?
Right.
And they tell you all about the other parts, and they tell you absolutely nothing about where does the idea come from. And people who have studied this found that having a good idea, a good question, right? It's a hypothesis. If you have a good hypothesis, like Einstein had a great hypothesis, fly alongside light and see what happens. If you have a good hypothesis, you're like 95% more likely to have a great answer, a great outcome in science, than if you have a dumb, bad, useless, poorly constructed question. But we don't teach our kids or ourselves how to come up with the right question. So there's this kind of deep drive toward objective learning. What is nature, what is the world outside really like? Not what I want it to be like. And you start thinking about how biased we are. Not always in a bad way, not just racially biased, just biased. And it turns out the brain, imagine going from being a baby to here, the brain by nature has to become biased to become efficient. We only have so many neurons. We only have so much memory. We only have so much time to do something. You drive by a forest. You don't go, there's a leaf, which you probably do when you're a baby. But you go like, oh, yeah, I've seen that forest. Next, I-5. So we classify and bias things in order to be efficient in doing the things we want to do, like get to work. That's fine if all you want to do is get to work. If I had to say to you, yeah, but did you see the whatever just inside that forest wall, you'd go, no, I didn't see it. So we stop seeing. And so to answer your question, if you're going to try to train your brain to be good at this, you have to start seeing again. And not seeing through your biases, which are many, many, but I call them, I think most neurophysiologists call them frames. So we call it dropping your frames. Right. So you have to train yourself to drop your frames so that you have the benefit of seeing what is. Not what you want to see, not what we were taught to see. Not, experience, by the way, is not the best. I hate that thing. Experience is not the best teacher. Experience is the sum of all of your biases. And you have to dump that and go back to go, almost like to a baby brain, and say, I just want to see what's out there.
Okay. So how do you go from pattern recognition to pattern discoveries? Like going from recognizing patterns and then projecting out where that might lead you to.
Right. I think projecting is a very dangerous word, so I might slightly modify your question. But making the jump from pattern recognition inputs to a pattern discovery. So I'll give you an example. I'll give you an interesting example. 2 days ago, front page New York Times, headline, the world's intel experts, U.S. intel experts, were completely surprised by North Korea's progress in developing missiles and nuclear weapons. Caught flat-footed. 2 years ago, my son Evan, who now runs InventIP, and myself, we were in London. We asked the past head of MI6, is North Korea getting foreign help from Russia and Iran to make missiles and from China and Iran to make nuclear weapons? Because they're making these discontinuous jumps in their abilities. And we've caught them with North Korean scientists in the Iranian facilities, and we've caught them illegally shipping missiles from Iran to North Korea. What do you think? He said, absolutely not.
Really?
Really. Now, there are a few different possible explanations for that. A, he was lying.
Yeah.
Because if you're the head of MI6, lying is a really important part of the day, right? Or we pay them to lie. So that could be, that's fine. Or B, these guys kind of get into a bias where they believe their own stuff, and they stop looking clearly, right? So I think it's more likely that it's that. And that the intelligence community had decided that it's going to take another 5 or 10 years. That was the thing, before the missiles were good enough, before the weapons were small enough. Okay, relax. And they actually briefed our current president, I forget his name, on that issue, right? So, yeah, they made a big mistake, I think.
Wow.
And it was unneeded. The information, the patterns were right there in front of you. All you had to do was read the newspaper. You didn't have to have any spies.
Okay. Reading your book, kind of a surprise chapter was when you called out Mr. Einstein and his biggest mistake. And could you share with the audience what that mistake was and what lessons from that practitioners can take away so they don't make a mistake like that?
Yeah, that's a good way to ask that. So for those of you who have ever studied physics, you're going to think the wrong thing about this definition. So if in textbooks, if you said, what's Einstein's biggest mistake, they would say the cosmological constant. Because he went back and forth on that, big deal, what's the shape of the universe, and he even called it that at one point. So that's not what we're talking about. He made a much bigger mistake than that. And what it was in his day, when he was growing up, just as he was coming into his own, all the physicists had spent 30 or 40 years arguing about what's called the ether, the space, what space is made of. Right. And he decided, I think for political reasons, not to get involved. And so he took the work, the mathematics that they had already made, used it, and he wrote in a paper and in a book, he said, because I do not need the ether, I will not refer to it in any future. And he never did again. That was his biggest mistake. Because, and now we're talking physics here for a minute, my apologies. But for those of you who understand physics, that meant, at that very moment that he said that, that he couldn't discuss charge, basically. And so from then onward, we had the separation between special relativity and all this great work he did and quantum mechanics and all the things that are charge-based. Never, even till today, been put back together again. And he spent the rest of his life trying to. And what I didn't know, so Walter Isaacson had just written a book, was writing a book about Einstein. He was a friend of mine, Walter. And I saw him, not Einstein. And I saw him, and I said, I've written a crazy piece called,
Right.
Einstein's biggest, are you interested? He said, sure. And I gave him a copy of the SNS report, and he wrote back and said, or I saw him again, he said, did you know that Einstein admitted that? I said, no, I'd never heard. Are you kidding? He said, yeah, he gave a speech at Leiden University in 1921, and he said, this was my greatest mistake.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very good. You talk in the book as well about using patterns to predict, or in some cases, improve the future. So how do you prescribe applying pattern recognition in, for example, curing cancer?
Right. So there's a piece in the book about this, which I think you're referring to.
Right.
And I had a family member who had cancer. And I had been watching this for a while because I have a friend who's a Nobel Prize winner. And he used to run the Hutch, Lee Harwell. And we had a bet going about this. People had discovered a long time ago that HPV virus, human papillomavirus, caused cervical cancer. We all understood. Everybody admitted it. So, okay, so there are these things that are patterns made or patterns broken. This was a pattern broken. All of us in school had been taught that cancer is caused by cosmic rays, right? Remember? Cosmic rays come down, hit your DNA, you have a mutation, you have cancer. Maybe a chemical caused it or some, pollutant or something, but basically it's a mutation. No one had ever taught us it was a virus. But here's common knowledge, it's a virus. So that's a pattern broken. And when you see a pattern broken like that, with everything else saying the opposite, here's this thing. It's like those little stories that I love in the paper that say, for the first time in 150 years, something or other happened. What was that? That's interesting, right? There's some information there. So in this case, the information was a virus can cause cancer. And I started looking more and more into it. It's like, well, how many others? How important is this? And as I was doing that, I made a bet with Lee Hartwell. I said, so, Lee, I think it's half the cancers are probably caused by a virus. We just haven't figured it out yet. He said, no, that's crazy. I'll go for a third. I said, okay. So that was our first bet. And then I saw him, I think 3 years later, at Fire again. And by then, a lot of information had come out. So now, HPV, there are a lot of variants of HPV. It can cause this, it can cause that. Things are getting interesting, right? So I said, I want to up my bet. And I said, 2/3. He goes, okay, I'll go half.
Oh.
So at least it was floating in my direction. It was kind of,
yeah.
and I don't know where he is on this today, but I think that we're in the process of learning that compared to cosmic rays, probably a nothing, viruses are a very important source of cancer. And it's great news because we can create a vaccine as we have for HPV and prevent boys and girls from ever getting certain types of cancer just by giving them a shot. I don't think any of us, when we were in school, thought that might happen. So if it turns out, whatever the number is, half or some good number, I can't imagine why we wouldn't all get those shots ASAP and get them for our kids, even more important, and then prevent them from. And one of the things that happened was my family member had a particular type, and I saw that there had been a study on cell cultures of that type, and look what was in there, HPV particles. And so I thought, whoa. And about 2 months later, 3 months, I don't know, sometime later, the guy who runs MD Anderson, a very smart cancer, I think they're the best cancer guys in the country, he published a paper. It was Kai Han. And the paper was, we now believe that there's a direct correlation between HPV and throat cancer. And I think that that's true. So, if you can find something like that with no training, I'm not a doctor, but if you bring this process to bear on problems like that, you can find amazing things. That's true pattern discovery.
Okay, good. Thank you, Mark. In the Pattern Future book, you cite 3 of your real-world calls about the future, calls that were very significant and crossed the global economies. Walk us through the process in predicting the great financial collapse, what other people call the Great Recession, that started in October of 2007, but that you called on March 12th, 2007, 7 months in advance.
Yeah, that was a tricky one. I was in London, staying in this very cool club that was an entrepreneurs club in London. And used to be the house of Earl Grey tea.
Oh,
yeah.
cool.
This thing happened. It was the end of February. It was February 26th, I think. All of the equity markets in the world went like this, about 1.5% to 3%. And if you're not paying attention, you wouldn't have noticed. But it's not like Spain went up and Germany went down. Everybody went down. And it wasn't like the Pope got shot. I mean, there was no news thing that normally there would be some horrible news thing that, there was nothing. The FT noticed this, and they wrote about it, and I noticed this, and it's like, the example I give is, what would, if you went outside and suddenly the whole ocean worldwide went down 3 feet and then came back up. It came back up pretty quick. You go, what the heck, How could that possibly happen? And so I knew that a lot of money had just moved. I didn't know, I had no idea why. And I started looking at it, so it took me a couple of weeks, right? I'm looking. The FT is looking too. They find nothing, I find nothing. And then I started getting some ideas. And you have to read the book to get all the details. I'm not trying to sell the book, it's a fairly detailed thing. But what I found was the global liquidity was more than I thought, and there was too much hot money out there worldwide. And it was able to move that fast, move overnight, right? And the metaphor that I gave for this in my own mind was, you walk into a warehouse, it's like dark, it's nighttime, and there's one other person in the warehouse, there's a little doorway, you can see there's somebody over there. And you smell this funny smell, and it's gasoline. And you look down, and the entire floor of the warehouse is gasoline. And this person, just as you realize that, the other person lights a cigarette. That was the world in March of that year. And I was doing a live interview on Europe Power Lunch on CNBC. As I figured this out, I was in the cab and I figured it out. And so this poor woman who was interviewing me, at the end of the interview, she goes, we're talking about Apple, I think. She says, is there anything else you want to talk about?
Yeah, just one little thing.
Yeah, So I thought, this is going to be a bad idea. But I did it anyway, being me, I guess. So I said, yeah, I think we're going to have a global crash. And her face just went white. You don't do that on live TV.
Right.
And she goes, oh, well, what should we do then? And I said, I'm not an investment counselor, but I think cash would be good. So that was, it was crazy. But it worked. I mean, that's what happened.
Well, and in that instant, you put your reputation on the line.
I had done that a few times before. Yeah, that's part of the job, I think.
All right. Well, last question, Mark. Besides reading your new book, which I highly recommend, what takeaway advice would you give to people who want to recognize patterns sooner than the average Joe? And we touched on that a little bit more, but if you have any takeaways.
I think your question is its own answer. The hard part, once you decide to do this, it's doable, which is why I wrote the book. If you want to do it, read the book, you can do it. The hard part is wanting to do it. Most of us don't want it. I think that's the trick. The trick is not even wanting to make the world better. Everyone wants to make the world better, unquote. But do you have a deep enough desire to really want to do it? If you do, here are the tools. But getting to that point where you want it, that's a challenge, I think. So most of us just want to get to work, get home, see the kids, and go to bed. And you have to want more than that in life. As important as that is, you have to want more than that if you're going to put yourself, and all those around you, by the way, through the trial and excitement of seeing what really is instead of seeing things the way you want to see them.
Okay. All right. Well, that ends the interview. There's a lot packed in this book. It's dense, but in a good way. So I recommend a read on it. We are now going to have Mark go to the podium and do his predictions, and then we'll have some Q&A. So,
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. Nice to be back. I really enjoy this event. So as in the past, but slightly more truncated, I'm going to talk briefly about some landscape issues in terms of economics or the economy of various countries, and then very briefly about some important issues that are broad issues in tech, and then I'll do the predictions, which I'll, as usual, have to read. So some things are really obvious. We're living in a very obvious time. And the theme, I try to name a theme for every year. This year coming up, I think, is nationalism and aggression, a bare-knuckles fight for money and power. That's what we're going to see. Doesn't matter whether it's Ukraine, South China Sea, the EU, UK, make a long list of countries and what they're going through. Eastern Europe, same thing. United States. The unintended consequences of the net and its alternative uses. I'm becoming personally convinced, I guess, that the net is not necessarily a good thing. And it was a wonderful thing when it was invented by the NSF and DARPA and so forth, ScienceNet. It was fantastic. You had these brilliant people just trying to do good stuff, talk to each other. But every year, more bad guys per total. Every year more, and more effective, and more dangerous, and more. So I'm not convinced that this is a happy story. I have a lot of trouble looking forward 5 or 10 years and going, wow, that was fun. When Russia's trying to destroy all democracies in the world and end free speech as we know it, when every criminal in the world is trying to get their hands on some bank, there's just no end of what I might call it the barnacle theory. The longer the ship is in the water, the more these parasites show up. And at some point, you just have to scrape the hull. I don't know how we're going to scrape the hull with the internet, but we need to do that. And then the myth of free trade finally collapses on a playing field dominated by China. So there's no such thing going on right now as free trade. We're in a fight for our lives between models, and that's a big, big theme, and it's becoming bigger. Those of you who've come to this before have heard me go on and on about this. I hope, to my credit, you found that it is in fact true. But what we're experiencing in the world is the emergence of that truth so that it's no longer a secret. When you first heard about this, it was kind of a secret, but it's not a secret now. Now it's the top line item for the White House. So everybody's playing this game. We've got to figure out how it's going to work out, hopefully settle it peacefully. In the world, I think there's a story going on this 2018, this year. That investors and dictators are up, employees and citizens are down. So it's great if you're an owner. Never a better time in the world. Not so great if you're the worker bee. And you've seen that going on for a long time. It's not getting better. It's getting more and more focused. We're going to put out a document, I think, this year through InventIP, which we'll call China's third wave. So we're seeing China in a new evolution of its own model. And how that plays out with the world will be very important. But we see a qualitative change now, just in the last 12 months, in how China is using its model within the world. Those of you who, well, I'll bring this up again in a minute, who read SNS will have learned something last night, which I'll touch briefly on in a couple of seconds. But China's gone through 3 waves, we think. So the first wave was stealing IP around the world. Second wave was building champions internally, using theft and fraud. And the third wave is their going out tsunami. So as they go out, a lot of things happen. And all of you will be involved in that process. I'd like to kind of flow through here. So if we go into technology for a minute, before I get to the predictions. So here's the GR. You probably, if you read SNS, you got this last night. It's called China's Chip Strategy. And the reason I'm bringing this up is I talked about this in our New York predictions dinner as an example of how things have changed. So what I'd like to talk about are 2 companies that you know well, Apple and Qualcomm. Apple, the most important company in the world making smartphones, and Qualcomm, the most important company in the world making smartphone chips. And both of them are champions in the West and in America. So what I'd like to just do is I'd like to run through very quickly the outline of Apple's experience in China. Number 1, it was allowed in early. China stole the Apple name, the look and feel of phones, the Apple stores, and so forth. Number 2, China decided to go after Apple using the favorite tool of an antitrust suit, Apple was quickly found guilty somehow and fined $1 billion, which it paid. Number 3, China used the new Security Act to force Apple to put research and data centers in China. Number 4, China used the same act to force disclosure and review of Apple's crown jewel IP, its source code. CEO Tim Cook denies handing it over. SNS believes Apple showed the code to Chinese inspectors in a closed environment. Chinese makers continued to copy Apple phones and features, keeping prices down. Number 5, local champions Xiaomi, Oppo, and Huawei continued to push Apple out of the Chinese market. Apple sales there went into a death spiral, and prices went up on reduced units. Number 6, Chinese supply chain companies stopped paying Qualcomm for the use of its intellectual property in smartphones expressed through Apple. And apparently, with Apple management's encouragement, stopped paying Qualcomm. Number 7, Apple dumped Qualcomm entirely and announced MediaTek, a Taiwanese and Chinese company, as the possible replacement vendor. Was this done at China's request? We don't know. MediaTek went after Chinese phone makers and equipment manufacturers, claiming that Qualcomm's new weakness was a threat to their future. Therefore, by MediaTek. Okay, so that's Apple. Now let's do Qualcomm. Number 1, Qualcomm was allowed into China early. China then stole key CDMA technology from Qualcomm using Siemens' help. Number 2, in antitrust action, Qualcomm was fined $1 billion and paid the fine. Number 3, Qualcomm was forced to cut royalty fees to Chinese phone makers in half, giving them an instant edge over all other global phone makers. Number 4, the rest of the world followed with antitrust suits in the EU, South Korea, the United States, etc. Number 5, China told suppliers not to pay Apple, so Apple stopped paying Qualcomm. Number 6, Qualcomm was forced into a consulting agreement to help China design the very latest in supercomputers and chips, which they're doing right now. Number 7, Qualcomm was forced into putting a research center in China. Number 8, Qualcomm revenues dropped by about 1/2 year to year. Number 9, earnings plummeted. And number 10, U.S. company Broadcom, until now headquartered in Singapore and run by a Taiwanese CEO, made a takeover bid for Qualcomm, which is still underway. I don't think this story has been told yet. I think you're hearing it for the first time, because I think we're the only ones who know it or see it this way. But this is a fascinating story. You have two of the most important companies in the world, and in tech, and in America, messing with each other, destroying each other's market share with China's encouragement. And I call this clearing the way, because if China wants to be a leader globally in chips, one of the ways they could do that would be to wipe out the guys who are currently the champions from the West. And they're doing a very, very helpful job so far. And I wish that the people who ran those two companies were smarter and recognized how they were being played. So I'm going to jump to countries for a moment, and you can give me a clue here. I'll go through these countries pretty quickly, and then I'll come down to the predictions. The U.S., shiny on the outside, but kind of rotting on the inside. Investors are happy, citizens are miserable. So I believe we'll still see a lot of up-market movement. The world wants to invest in the United States, but we don't have the core productivity that we need to have to be really healthy. China, get ready for the military as Xi moves from consolidating power to distracting citizens away from his failing economic plans. And I mean that really seriously. I think that China is in a world of hurt economically, internally. And the fear I have is that when that happens to a dictator, typically what happens is they use military adventurism to distract their population from internal problems. And the risk of that happening right now, particularly in the South China Sea, is extremely high. And number 3, UK, to me, scary and down, followed by scary and up. So Brexit, okay, they'll get through Brexit, but the UK has made some really big miscalculations in my thinking. And really, if you look at them closely, I disagree with the attitude, I guess is the right word, that the American election was not affected by Russia. I believe that is an untrue statement. And the reason I believe that is Mark Zuckerberg, who I find to be a dishonest person, internally did tests before the American election to see how much he could sway elections using various news feeds changes inside of Facebook. And they found a 20 to 40% ability. Not a 1 to 2%, 20 to 40%, which he forgot to talk about in Congress when he was being questioned by the Senate. So if you look at Brexit, or if you look at the American election, and it's hinging on a 1, 2, 3% swing, and Mr. Zuckerberg's team could change your votes by 20 to 40%, what do you think? If the Russians, we know the Russians came into Facebook and Twitter, if they use these tools just as he had done in his tests, why do we think the way we used to? Why is this an old school thought? This ought to be a new school thought, which is any democracy might be up to a 20% swing or more. Well, every election I've ever heard of is based less than 20%. So this is a much more dire situation, in my opinion, than you're being told. I'm sure that the people in power, starting with whatever his name, the president, want people to think that they got there honestly and on their own merits. But I don't think that's true. And we would be much healthier, and I think the Democrats proved this last week with their new report, we would be much healthier recognizing that Russia isn't just focused on America. They're doing this worldwide. They're looking at all kinds of democracies and how they can destabilize them. Caused a lot of trouble for NATO, caused a lot of trouble for the EU. That's a happy day for Mr. Putin. So I would guess that not only was the American election dramatically and wrongly affected, we got the wrong result based on interference, I believe Brexit's the same story. We know that they were in Brexit. We know they were involved in trying to jigger with the referendum. There's no reason. That's a 2% vote right there. So I think that probably Brexit is fake, meaning that left to their own devices and having their own internal arguments, the British would have voted to stay in. But Russia wanted them out. The better they can destabilize the EU, the better. So you have China working with Russia on this. So China came in and gave Greece a lot of money. So Greece, for the first time ever, became the first member of the EU to vote against everybody else at China's request. Happened about 3 months ago. Oops. You just see this happening, in the east. So now the Silk Road from China is going to go through, like, Slovakia. I mean, come on, So all these things are happening at once with the same goal of destabilizing what was kind of a beautiful story, the EU. That's a happy day for China, too, I think. So these things are really important, and they are the story of 2018. There's no indication whatsoever that the White House guy understands, A, it's important, regardless of his pride, and B, do something. Now, at least in France, Macron did something. The French government did something when they found out that Russia was messing with them. They passed new laws. They looked really hard at it. They put up defenses. They worked on it, and it seemed to have been pretty effective. But we haven't gotten to that stage yet. We need to do that. Germany, I think, the alt-right keeps growing, but Merkel probably makes it. She's, what is it, fourth try now? She's busy tonight doing something. I think she'll make it. The EU, confused and stumbling. The Middle East, crink. So this thing I was describing a minute ago. So China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. That's the new axis. I don't want to say evil. It's just the new axis. And they work closely together. They have shared interests. Anybody who says they're not working closely together isn't paying attention, in my opinion. China's never going to help us with North Korea. That's just a facade. That's a joke. The sooner that the White House gets over that dream, the better. Let's see. Turkey, I think they're out of NATO. They're buying Russian fighters. They just had another order for Russian military equipment. I think they're out of NATO. It's just nobody's admitted it yet. Russia continued consolidating power, destabilizing democracies everywhere, makes new aggressive moves in the Ukraine, perhaps Moldova, elsewhere. So their adventurism has paid off so well in the Ukraine, I can't imagine why they wouldn't continue to do the same. And I expect to see more military action and more InfoWar action all along the old Soviet border. As Putin, his China dream, his Russia dream, is to recreate the Soviet Union. I think that he will do that. South Korea, very serious economic straits, with Samsung in turmoil internally and challenged by China externally, and North Korea kind of out of control. Number 10, Japan, the only way to go is up, good year, but hooking up with China would be disastrous. There have been some discussions of that, but I don't think they will do that. Italy is in very, 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 very scary economic territory. And as I mentioned, Greece is now a Chinese vassal. All these things are kind of probably not in the press. So feel free to take shots at me over these things, but I believe that they are true. As for predictions, going pretty well, actually. Paul and I talk about this every year. It looks as though, based on last year's successes, I'm now at about 95.2% success for these 10 things I'm about to read to you coming up compared to last year. So as of now, 95.2, probably down to 10% next year, but right now it's a good number. And then here are the predictions for 2018, and I'll apologize ahead of time for reading them, but I read them because I'll have to live by them or die by the sword, so I tend to read them to get them exactly right. And then we talk about them after this. So number one, the international car connection competition of 5G versus vehicle-to-vehicle, or V2V, turns out to be based upon the wrong question. Both win in a hybrid of function and timing. V2V is first out and used for time and function critical communications, crash avoidance, object navigation. 5G picks up the rest, providing entertainment, wide area navigation, road assistance, traffic data, and other services in which latency or failure are tolerable. Number two, artificial intelligence splits. AI breaks into two separate fields, incremental AI and discovery AI. Currently recognized as a necessary tool that generally delivers important but incremental improvements, we will see the first major shoots of beyond AI as discovery AI emerges to deliver true pattern discoveries. Number three, security, the impossible dream. The tech industry rolls out a stunning number of smart but completely insecure Internet of Things devices intended to moderate the compute load at the center, but destroying any sense of net security, while even the best centralized clouds get hacked. Everyone who cares about security turns to encryption, increased authentication, and nightly prayer. True. Number four, cryptocurrencies go nuts. Now, I had to give this talk on December 7th, so I just want you to know the things that have happened since December 7th hadn't happened when I wrote this down. Bitcoin theft becomes common. Serious blockchains become commercial and common. China attempts blockchain hacking through spoofing, corruption, and/or unauthorized control. Prices display dizzying volatility. Libertarians get the Wild West they have dreamed of and probably deserve. Number five, drones of all kinds dominate military planning. Imagine one F-35 or aircraft carrier versus 1,000 armed, intelligent, autonomous swarming drones, or 1,000 versus 1,000, or one submarine versus 500 underwater torpedo drones. Warfare will never be the same. Number six, content and data become increasingly weaponized. Infowar actions expand, public cynicism and mistrust grow as the net moves from a once happy neighborhood into the dark side of town. Corrupted training files, the Achilles heel of AI, invasive personal profiling disguised as advertising, and surging online crime increasingly turn the net into a threat. Number seven, China's high-end strategies put non-Chinese global tech firms at serious risk as they get played off of each other and have little recourse or help from their own governments. Qualcomm, Apple, and Ericsson continue to suffer at their hands. Huawei gains the negative brand perception of being China-Zilla, a relentless, state-supported global bully in almost every electronic appliance market. No one likes them, and no companies can compete with China's resources. Number eight, commercial space has arrived. Elon Musk achieves his dream of transforming commercial space launches from exotic, often dangerous events to having the drama and timing of Paris-Berlin train travel. From this year forward, space will be dominated by commercial enterprise. Number nine, biology and medicine become inextricably intertwined with computing. Medicine requires increased computing at all levels, and computer design continues to evolve using biomimicry. Which is which? Evolved biology equates with natural intelligence. Number 10, patient heal thyself. The concept that the most effective treatments are those that help the body to heal itself become mainstream. With proven success in augmented immunity cancer treatments, many other approaches using the body's own systems to reestablish or retain good health states will emerge in both research and general practice. So that's 10. They could all be wrong, and that's it. So what I would be happy to do is take your complaints or discuss the relative merits or failures of those ideas, or talk about how your week is going. So please feel free. I think we have runners with microphones. So if you'll raise your hand.
I'm going to hand it over. Louis actually hand it to you. Can I hand it over?
Yeah, hi. Louis Calkin went to Canadian Consulate in Seattle. That was a great presentation. Thanks. I'm wondering, I didn't hear Canada on the list. It's probably not a major power like the other ones. But I'm wondering, in terms of what your thoughts are on Canada-U.S. trade relations and what you see happening with NAFTA, because it's really rocky right now in terms of going into the 6th round of negotiations.
I like Canada. Everyone likes Canada, I think. There's a problem. A couple problems. Canada is depending very heavily on China. The very first thing that your new Prime Minister did, having been elected as an eco guy, was to declare the pipeline through very much complaining BC and overrode their interests by being a federal Prime Minister. And anyone who didn't get that wasn't paying attention. So his lord wasn't ecology. It was money, which is typical, but maybe saving Alberta, which is important. And who's going to buy it? China's going to buy it. More and more, I see that he is tipped toward China. I don't know why. The UK is much worse than Canada this way, by the way. Australia learned the lesson the hard way, but they let it go too far. So the whole Commonwealth has this weakness, in my opinion. I don't quite get it. I think that in the UK, it's guilt. They're guilty. They feel guilty about what they did to China, and they're trying to pay it back forward, and they're desperate for Chinese money during Brexit. Canada, I don't get that. So, yes, Canada needs oil money. They need a buyer. Okay, but the result of all this stuff is then you get into this whole NAFTA question, and things go south really fast. So the fact that Trudeau brought a blanket action in the WTO yesterday, that was a really stupid move. Now, it's a good negotiating move. So if you're dealing with Trump as a deal guy, then that's a good move. But because the president is so unstable and unable to take criticism and unwilling to brook any kind of resistance, I think it's a very dangerous poker game that Mr. Trudeau is playing. So if it were a different president, fine, not this one. And increasingly I feel as though he's not, he meaning Trudeau, isn't really mature enough, or he's getting bad advice from somebody. So I certainly would like to see Canada and the U.S. continue to have great relations. I don't think whether it's through NAFTA or not through NAFTA, I don't particularly care. I know that we'll have to have a good trade agreement with Canada and with Mexico either way. I don't care what it's called. Maybe nobody cares what it's called. But doing these things, like what he just did, certainly will make it much, much harder. So if your question is it going to get worse? Between these two guys, it could get a lot worse, at least temporarily. Maybe we have 4 years of very rough water. Or 2 years. 1 year, 6 months. Who else? Yeah.
So you had mentioned earlier in your book about pattern recognition and later about Elon Musk and also artificial intelligence. And as you recall, last year Elon Musk came out and spoke against the evolution of AI as a pattern that we need to be aware of. And your predictions as far as pattern recognition and evolution of that science probably into AI, I assume that's where it's headed as well. Is that a concern that we're going to see in a future prediction?
Elon is a very, very, very smart guy. I have a lot of respect for his intelligence, so I wouldn't discount his concerns. He's probably smarter than Stephen Hawking, so I would be more interested in Elon's point of view than Hawking's point of view. But the people I think who think of Terminator or things like that as a path probably are getting it wrong, in my opinion. So I don't think one could say don't be concerned. I think we have to be very concerned. We need to have rules. We need to have ways of making those rules stick. That's important, and it's a good time to have the conversation. Having said all that, AI today is pretty darn stupid. And people in the media, I mean, AI, and you kind of get like, oh my God, what's going to happen next? AI is pretty stupid. And as an example of how stupid it is, two things. One is, any good first-year college student can take a Coursera course from Andrew Ng and get AI in about 6 weeks. Well, that's not hard. So how, and then if you're Google, let's say, and you're running the smartest guys in the world doing AI against advertising techniques, you get a 10% improvement on how to focus on selling this guy a car. That is what I would call incremental improvement. So, yeah, a little bit better every day at recognizing facial recognition or family members. This is very basic stuff. And it's not impressive to me. So, currently, there isn't a lot of indication on the ground that what is called AI is not only not threatening, it's not exciting. It's kind of stupid. Does that mean it's going to be like that forever? No. So that's why I was saying earlier, there will be a different kind of AI, which is more creative, I think, and much more interesting, more productive, more delivering of true discoveries, and that's when things are going to get really interesting. So again, I think having the conversation now is good, but I'm not as concerned as he is in the way that he talks about it.
Hi, I'm Adam from SPIE, Adam Resnick. Hi, I'm over here. Hello, hello.
Oh, way over there, hi.
So you talked about 2018 being in the US being a happy year for investors and perhaps a sad year for worker bees. How long does the awesome investment run go?
That's you want it in minutes or hours?
But given the many points of volatility that you talked about around the world, some of us who are sitting on our 401ks or 403bs, we just wonder, So thank you.
Well, if I were to reinterpret your question, it would be what could take it down, right? And when would that happen? Sound a little dark. I think that we are in the late 1930s right now. So different from then, in terms of 29, late 30s. And if you think back to how the UK acted vis-a-vis Hitler, or if you think about how IBM and Ford in the United States acted as Hitler came to power, and they just wanted the money. IBM made the accounting machines that put all those Jewish people to death. They were happy to take the check. Ford made the machines that helped Hitler roll through Europe. They were happy to take the check and kept doing it even when we were at war, secretly. So we are again in a world where we have global CEOs who are responding only to greed and probably their own short-term compensation plans and don't have a country. They have shareholders. But we are in a world that does have countries, actually. And a lot of those countries know that they're a country. And a lot of the companies in those countries know that they are that country's company. If you're a Chinese company, you're not confused about what country you're in. And the same is true in Russia. Here in America, it's just love everybody to death and get the check. So if you're going to ask what in that possible situation could create a bad thing, I think I've answered your question. That behavior, if continuing to happen, will create a bad thing. And I don't know exactly when, but that's the worst thing that I think that's the most likely cause of a sudden disjoin in this happy run-up that we've had. Maybe it's 3 years. It could be, it's not necessarily up to us. So if the Chinese sunk an American ship tomorrow, that would do it, I think. So I think that it's really a matter of the world as a system and how it's going to behave.
Yeah. Hi, Mark. I'm Werner Kopp from Conversica. I have a question. You glanced a little bit over the Middle East. Is that a sign that it's less of a powder keg, or you didn't just have time to get into that, like Israel, Palestinians, ISIS, Iraq, all of that?
The Middle East seems to have changed. And, you know, the story, I guess, for us for the last 20 years, since 9/11, has been terrorism. I think that's an old story, don't you? Are you tired of that story? I'm bored. I don't think we have to send 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 troops somewhere because 3 bad guys blew up a car, or, you know. I'm kind of, at this point, I'm kind of like, okay, let the FBI do their job internally and let's keep going. So, meanwhile, it looks to me as though, quietly, someone in the White House, I don't know who, has worked with someone in Israel, I just make something up, Netanyahu, and Egypt and Saudi Arabia to quietly, secretly get a thing together where you position Saudi and all these other guys against Iran. And the secret war that we're just starting to hear about is going to be between Iran and Saudi Arabia, with everybody else falling into place. So Sunnis and Shia, big surprise. That's been going on for 2,000 years now, I think. So if you're asking about the Middle East, that's the future of the Middle East, is watching that unfold. And we saw that with the attempt by the Saudis to go after Qatar, and then we saw it with the Saudis' attempt to dethrone the Prime Minister of Lebanon. And you know, you can tell what's happening with the intent of the change of power inside the Saudi family and the imprisoning of 200 princes or whatever it was. Why would they do that? So you know, the consolidation of control in that bloodline and the getting ready for a big fight. So I think we're going to see this big fight between those two sides. And the problem for me is it's not our fight. They can have at it all night long as far as I'm concerned. But why would we even consider getting involved? And the only answer is because Netanyahu wants us there. And I'm deeply concerned that that'll be enough to actually get us re-involved one more time, guys, in a whole new conflict called Sunni versus Shia. Hope that doesn't happen.
Hi there. Hi, I'm William. I'm a student here at WCC in the Cybersecurity Bachelor Program, and I was wondering, you alluded earlier to InfoWars starting up across the globe. I was wondering where you see the industry of cybersecurity going in regards to those InfoWars.
Right. So if I might also reinterpret your question, is there anything, and what could it be, that someone like you or someone who's really smart, good at, I'm making an assumption here, really good at cyber stuff could do on behalf of anybody, let's say the United States or some state in the United States, to prevent that happening? And there are things that you could do. It would require, I think, a willpower that may not be there yet. Maybe if we admitted how much change happened in the last election, it would drive our willpower a little harder. But certainly things like authentication in posting, a lack of anonymous posting, there are some really obvious things that can be done in terms of checking who's saying what to control the problem. That doesn't get rid of it, but it controls it. The difficulty intellectually that I have is that I don't think you can stop it. So in other words, you know, if your name is Will and I'm Russia, I can spoof you, come in as Will, and then post stuff on Facebook. So Then the question is, how do you stop that, right? How do you prevent Russia from doing that? Can you get things secure enough in terms of authentication so that Russia can't bring bots into the process? I was on stage recently at TAGNW, and somebody asked about how many bots there were. And I said, look, I think that Zuckerberg is not telling the truth, may not even know, probably. And I would guess that it's a much bigger number than people think. So of all the Facebook members, how many are actually have a heartbeat? And my guess was 20% to 40% don't. Let's say 20. But that's a huge number, right? That's a huge number. I since learned that Zuckerberg claims more members in the United States than there are people. So that would be a giveaway, kind of an indicator there that maybe I'm right. So some number, but it's a pretty big number. And so it's really a tough tech question. It's good. I hope you figure it out. I don't have the answer, but I think there are answers, and they're a combination of policy and tech. So if someone could force Facebook to authenticate every user and convince all of our social networks there is no anonymous posting, that would go 80% of the way. You know, that'd be pretty good. Make it two-factor, and that'd go 90% of the way. So there are things that could be done from a cyber perspective to be really, really beneficial. We'll probably get to that point where if we're going to let somebody talk to the world and make them angry about anything, you know, Black Lives Matter, whatever it's going to be that Russia worked on, they have to say who they are. They don't have the right of speaking to the public without taking responsibility for being who they are. We should do that. I don't know how we're doing at time, Paul. Are we good? Or? Okay.
Hi, Mark Ingram, Crystal Clear, IT Solutions.
Hi.
Hey, beyond blockchain, what do you see beyond cryptocurrencies, what do you see happening with blockchain this year or perhaps beyond? What do you think of the first one or two use cases that really take off? Thank you.
Of what?
Of blockchain technology.
Oh. Well, I think blockchain's here to stay. Yeah. I think cryptocurrencies, I don't see them as currencies. I see them as investment stories that are very, very exciting if you're 20 and have plenty of time to recover from all your losses when you... You have to have a strong heart for that game, you know. But the technology behind it is pretty interesting. The other reason I don't think of cryptocurrencies as currencies is that, to me, a currency has an army behind it. You used to have gold behind it. You drop the gold standard, then what? Well, the full faith of the United States of America. That means the military. That means you pay your bills or we send somebody after you, right? So anything that can, here's a little rule that I just made up called Mark's Rule. If it can be hacked, it will be hacked. There are no exceptions to that. So NSA, they know this already. You know. So if it can be hacked, it will be hacked. Well, okay, get ready. So even blockchain, it turns out, can be manipulated. I don't know, hacked, manipulated. And if you own 40% of the nodes, you can start to make things look kind of wonky. You can affect the outcome of things. And at 50%, I'm told, you actually have control. Well, who has that? I think you can spoof nodes. So I think if you had a node look like one node, you could have 10 nodes behind it. I think that's true. And if you looked around the world and you said, well, who owns all the nodes right now? Who do you think has the most nodes? Yeah. Who just made it illegal to do peer brokerages for Bitcoin? China. And who made it illegal to exchange coins? China. Why would they allow the mining and have the most nodes of any country in the world and not allow the use? That's interesting. So I think that it's fraught. It's a fraught situation. Privately, you know, if J.P. Morgan wants to do it and just do it inside J.P. Morgan, fine. But you know, what can get hacked will get hacked.
I'm going to turn it over for the last question to Troy.
Hey, Mark. Troy DeFrank with British Columbia Trade and Investment. One tech giant that I didn't hear you mention, which folks in this room probably hear way too much of, and is a big influence in this part of the world, is Amazon. Just coming off one of the most remarkable sort of years, I
You
think,
bet.
for a company in terms of acquisition and verticals that it's disrupted. Just curious what your outlook is for that company. Is it going to continue sort of breakneck growth moving forward? And yeah, your thoughts on Amazon.
Very simple. Through the sky. No end. We're going to buy our clothing and find our girlfriends and flowers and healthcare and pharmacies and groceries and write poetry and books and music and movies and we're going to just live in Amazon's world. Yeah, I just don't see any end at all. Okay, thank you. Thanks.
So when we started this journey with Mark, we gave him a nice plaque. I forgot even how big it is. Yeah, big thank you plaque. And so each year we add another year for him on that plaque. Thank you.
I usually charge $30,000 for a speech, but now I get these. No,
Yeah,
thank you very
we're
much.
friends though.
That's
yeah.
true. Thank you.
And we're also making a donation again to the TAG Scholarship Fund in your name.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're very fortunate to be in this lovely room at Qualcomm Community College, but I must say and give appreciation to Varvid for streaming this great event out to the world essentially through the TAG Facebook. So thank you, Varvid. And it's now my pleasure to bring up Ed O'Neill, wherever he is out there. Ed, as you know by now, is the Executive Director of Emergency Reporting and the presenting sponsor here for this event today. And that check was very important for this event happening. Ed's a 30-year technologist with a stellar track record. He joined emergency reporting from another part of this country in 2015. And what I was impressed with is he immediately got involved in TAG and is a driving force on the TAG board now and appreciates the importance of improving the technology climate here in Whatcom County. So please help me welcome Ed and Emergency Reporting to the stage as the galactic sponsor of TAG.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everyone. We're having a lot of fun with this galactic thing, mostly because it's impossible to follow Mark. So I'm going to try and bring some local color to this and a couple local predictions. So what is this galactic thing anyway? When I first came to town, I joined TAG at a point where we were kind of at a little rough spot. We'd lost some grants, membership was off. It was just not the brightest time for the organization. But at ER, we really recognize the value of TAG, the thought leadership that it brings, and the opportunity to have events like this, training, networking, community advocacy. So this was really our opportunity. And I had the great pleasure of observing one of our founders and also a past board member of TAG, Mr. Dave Adams. He remarked in the face of this challenge that leaders have to lead. So we took our turn at ER and stepped up with a new level of sponsorship that allowed TAG to rebuild and recover from its challenges. And with your help, we've achieved this goal and now have one of the most admired associations in the Pacific Northwest. I'll give everybody a hand for that. So TAG was also important to ER. We got a lot out of TAG. Our business was experiencing fantastic growth, and to fuel that growth, we needed exceptional associates with deep technical skills. But that's really why we're in Bellingham. When I travel, and I travel a lot, I get asked, what is Bellingham known for? And I'm pretty quick to answer, a fantastic education system that provides abundant human resources to fuel a growing business like ours. I personally feel that the best product out of Bellingham is a graduating student. So I want to offer again a quick round of applause to all the students, faculty, and administrators in the room. We thank you for all you've done to make our business successful. And what a success it's been. This is Founders Week at Emergency Reporting. 15 years ago this Wednesday, two very bright visionary gentlemen, Adrian Mintz and Dave Adams, incorporated a business to develop software for the fire service. I'd like to share with you a little of what we do. Oops.
Taking fire and EMS data management to a higher level. That's what Emergency Reporting, the most trusted fire and EMS records management solution, can do for your public safety agency. Since 2003, we've been a 100% cloud-based system. There's no software to install. All you need is a web browser and an internet connection to manage your entire department anytime, anywhere, fast and easy. Worried about the security of your data? Don't be. We've got you covered. Our security is so robust that fire and emergency services across the Department of Defense trust us to keep their data safe. That's Emergency Reporting. Mobile, powerful, secure, and global.
So, fun times at ER. We're building all kinds of really exciting products, and our reach is continuing to grow. But unlike this picture, I can assure you that the corporate experience has not always been smooth sailing. No small business ever is. But with some hard work, a little luck, and the support of the community, things have really become exciting. I remember 2 years ago when I first joined ER, starting to get introduced in the community, and I would proudly say that I work for ER, this exciting software company, and a lot of times I got a, "Oh, who's that?" as an answer back. But now, thanks to TAG and all you and our growing team of associates have done, we've become a well-known corporate citizen, and it's our pleasure to give back to the community through sponsorship of events like this. Our growth has been spectacular. As a private company, we don't share financial information, but as you can see from this picture, which represents our headcount growth, we've really grown a lot in the last couple years. And most of these positions have been in Bellingham. This gave us another problem, which forced us to move our corporate headquarters to a larger location in Barclay Village. We like it so much there that we've committed to a long-term lease, and I'm expecting that later this year we'll have a sign up on the building so we can be more visible to the community. Hey, I think this worked well for Faith Life. I'm pretty sure they bought the tallest building in the town just so they had the most visible sign location. I also want to comment on what it means for us to do business in Bellingham. The local environment shapes a lot of what we do. One of the things that we do is offer flexible schedules so our staff can enjoy the beautiful environment here. We also got a chance to share that with our customers. This year we brought our customer national training event into Bellingham and hosted it at the Bellwether. We also took them on a bay tour on the schooner Zodiac, which was absolutely spectacular. Now that was smooth sailing. We also embrace all the local attributes that are unique to Bellingham. I think we are the only software company I know of that has our own private line of craft beer. Well, actually, it's not ours. Our friends at Boundary Bay let us private label some of their exceptional IPA. But as you can imagine, this became one of our most popular promotional items at our trade shows. So I have a prediction here, which is 2018 is going to be the best year ever for emergency reporting. And if you're a student in the room, be sure you check us out. I'd hate to see you waste good talent working for one of those dull companies like Microsoft and Amazon when you can enjoy the best technology and the best environment here in Bellingham. So in closing, I'd like to thank Dave and Adrian, our founders, for inviting me along on this journey. I also want to express my deep thanks to the ER leadership team. Without their support, none of this success would be possible. And last but not least, our team at ER. You guys are the ones that get it done for our customers every day. And on behalf of our founders, Dave and Adrian, thank you for all you do, and thank you to TAG.
Wait, hold on a second, Ed, if you don't mind. It's been a
true delight for us at TAG to have you join us from the fair state of Iowa. We'd like to recruit from Iowa, in fact, and glad to have many emergency reporting people here. Can the committee come up? Krista, can you come up too? Where's Athena? Okay. You want a hand? Okay. So if emergency reporting would stand up, we want to applaud your very successful 15 years in our community and are so glad to celebrate with you today. Athena's a very gifted cake maker, among many other things.
So is that real?
Yes, it's real. Wow. It's real. It's real. It's quite heavy. It's quite heavy. Thank you. Also, a ton of thanks to Krista, who's been a really important member of this committee, Athena and Paul Gray, who you met earlier. This has been such a wonderful event again. I am so delighted to have been a part of it and delighted for the deep investment that Mark and his team make in our community. And it really speaks to the growth and projections that are expected here. Dear friend asked me what, as a board member, we're all most excited about, and of course it's all of you. I'm excited to see more and more investment from our private equity sector, watching companies grow quickly and workforce development here. Lots of things to celebrate. So want to thank also our sponsors. Thank you so much to Varvid for allowing us to stream this within the community. I was looking through my Facebook queue, and we have a lot of online people joining us from around the Pacific Northwest. Thanks to our presenting sponsor, Emergency Reporting, to VSH, Whatcom Community College, and Crave Catering. Thanks again also to our table sponsors, Alpha Technologies, Bellingham Angel Investors, Cascade Job Corps, Skagit Bank, and Remax. Please stay tuned to your email. We will have a membership meeting coming up in February, and there are a lot of upcoming events that are visible and available on our website, and lots of fun things coming up. So thank you so much for coming out today for another wonderful predictions event. And at the back of the room, as you're exiting, the other thing I'm most excited about is that Mark committed this book to print. Having tried to glean some of the points of things that he's generated over the years and some of the process and interest, I've had many fun times with Mark thinking about these things. And so very delighted to have this shared with our community, and it's, as Paul alluded to, an absolutely wonderful book. So they're available at the back of the room with Mark, also online, and they will ship additional books to you, signed if you'd like one. So big round of applause to all of you for your wonderful contributions, and so glad to have you here today. Thank you.